My high school ex tried to reconnect after 10 years. He texted me saying, "I made a mistake, we should have stayed together." I replied with a photo of my wedding ring and said, "You should have stayed in touch when I was single." It had been 10 years, 10 long years since I had last spoken to Ben, my high school boyfriend. I had spent the better part of my 20s putting the past behind me, focusing on my career and building a life with someone who actually valued me. Ben and I had been together for almost 2 years, the classic high school relationship where we thought we'd grow old together. But life had a way of changing things. I graduated, he didn't. I moved on to college, he stayed behind. We drifted apart, and with that drift came the inevitable breakup. It had been messy at the time, as most high school relationships are, but eventually we both moved on. Or at least I thought we had. I was sitting at my desk at work one afternoon, scrolling through emails and preparing for the next big project when my phone buzzed. I didn't think much of it at first. A quick glance told me it was just a text from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, assuming it was just another spam message. But something made me stop. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was just the fact that I had nothing else to distract me from my thoughts. I opened the message. It was from Ben. "Ben, hey, I know this is out of the blue, but I've been thinking a lot lately. I made a mistake. We should have stayed together. I never should have let you go. I know it's been a long time, but I'd love to reconnect. Maybe grab coffee sometime." I stared at the screen, my heart skipping a beat. The last time I had heard from Ben was when he called to apologize for things ending the way they did. It was a half-hearted attempt at closure, but we had both moved on. At least I thought we had. A wave of emotion washed over me. I didn't know how to feel. It had been years and I had no idea what he wanted from me now. Why was he reaching out? Was it genuine or just nostalgia for the good old days? I took a deep breath. The timing of this message couldn't have been worse. I was married, to a man who loved and respected me, to someone who saw me for who I was now, not who I had been back then. My life was in a different place entirely. I had built something stable and secure, and Ben's message felt like a sudden, unwelcome disruption. For a moment I thought about ignoring it altogether. After all, it had been 10 years. I was happy, I had moved on, and I didn't need to revisit the past. But curiosity gnawed at me. What did Ben want after all this time? Was he truly sorry for what happened, or was this just a selfish attempt to relive a chapter of his life he couldn't let go of? I took a deep breath, put my phone down for a moment and tried to gather my thoughts. Then, without overthinking it, I decided to respond. I wanted to make it clear that I was no longer the same person he had known in high school. I had changed. I wasn't the girl he once dated, and I certainly wasn't interested in reopening old wounds. But I also didn't want to be cruel. "Me, it's been a long time, Ben. I'm glad to hear you're doing well, but I'm married now. I'm happy in my life and I'm not looking to reconnect. I think you should have stayed in touch when I was single." I hesitated before hitting send. I didn't want to sound harsh, but I wanted to be clear. He didn't get to just waltz back into my life after all this time. He had his chance, and he let it slip away. I had spent years moving on from him, learning new things about myself, and now I had a life that was more fulfilling than anything we'd had together. I pressed send, and the message was off. My phone buzzed almost immediately. "Ben, I understand, but I was thinking more about the way things ended between us. I never got to apologize properly. I know we were young, but I regret how things went down. Maybe we can talk, just catch up." I stared at the screen, a tight knot forming in my stomach. This wasn't what I had expected. I had assumed he'd accept my response and move on. But there it was again, his need for closure, his need to make amends for the past. Part of me felt guilty. I had spent so many years wondering if I had done the right thing, if I had been too harsh when I ended things with him. But I quickly pushed that thought aside. I wasn't the same person I had been back then. I had grown, and I had learned to prioritize my own happiness. I wanted to move on, but Ben's words lingered. The past was pulling at me in a way I wasn't prepared for. I couldn't deny that there had been good moments in our relationship, moments that had shaped me, but I had outgrown them. I had outgrown him. I looked at my wedding ring, my fingers tracing the band. My husband, Jake, was everything Ben had never been. He supported me, encouraged me to chase my dreams, and respected me in ways that Ben never had. My life with Jake was built on trust, communication, and mutual respect. It was everything I had hoped for in a relationship, everything I had craved in high school but never received. Suddenly, the weight of it all felt too much. Ben had been my past, but Jake was my present and my future. I wasn't going to let some text message from a ghost of my past derail everything I had worked so hard to build. I took a deep breath and made a decision. I would respond one last time, but this time, I would make it clear once and for all that Ben was part of my past, and that was where he would stay. I snapped a picture of my wedding ring, the light catching the diamond just right, and attached it to my reply. The gesture was symbolic. It was a reminder of the life I had now, a life I had built from the ground up, not based on old memories, but on new dreams and a new love. I typed my message. Me, you should have stayed in touch when I was single, Ben. I'm happy now. I don't need apologies or closure from the past. I've moved on. This is my reality now. I hit send and stared at the screen for a moment, waiting for a response. When the message was sent, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. There was no need to overthink it anymore. Ben wasn't a part of my life anymore, and I wasn't about to let him make a reappearance in any form. That night I told Jake about the message from Ben. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew I needed to be open with him. He listened quietly, his expression unreadable as I told him everything about Ben reaching out, the message, and my response. "I'm glad you told me," Jake said, his voice calm and reassuring. "It sounds like you've handled it well. You're happy and that's all that matters. But I won't lie, it sounds like Ben is still holding onto something from the past." I nodded. "I don't know what he wants, Jake, but I don't want him to interfere with what we have. I've moved on, I'm with you now." Jake took my hand, squeezing it gently. "I trust you. I don't think you need to worry about Ben. We're building a life together and that's what matters." I felt the warmth of his words and the certainty of his touch. It was true. We were building a future together, one filled with love, hope, and commitment. I didn't need Ben's closure or validation. I had everything I needed right in front of me. Later that evening, just before bed, I received one last message from Ben. It was short, simple, and to the point. "Ben, I get it. I'm sorry for bringing this up. I hope you find what you're looking for." I stared at the message for a few moments, a sense of finality settling in. Ben was a part of my past, but my future was with Jake. I didn't need to revisit old wounds. I had made my peace, and I was ready to move forward. I put my phone down, turned off the lights, and settled into bed beside Jake, who pulled me close, wrapping his arms around me. As I drifted off to sleep, I realized something important. The past was where it belonged, and the future was bright with the person I loved, the person who had always been there for me. The days following Ben's text were a blur. I had made it clear to him that I was happy in my life now, that I had moved on and had no desire to reconnect. But even as I had sent the final message with a picture of my wedding ring, a symbol of everything I had built with Jake, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease in the pit of my stomach. Why had Ben reached out now, after all this time? What did he expect from me? And why did it still bother me that he had the audacity to come back after a decade of silence? I tried to brush it off as nothing more than an old flame flickering in the past, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Every time I checked my phone, I saw his name at the top of the conversation, the messages lingering in the background like a ghost I couldn't banish. I had sent my response, and I had made it clear that I was happily married. So why was his message still haunting me? Jake noticed it too. He was intuitive, and the unease I felt wasn't something I could hide from him. After a few days of being unusually quiet and distant, he finally asked what was bothering me. We were sitting at the kitchen table one evening, sharing a bottle of wine after a long day. "Sarah, talk to me. What's going on? You've been acting different since that text from Ben." I looked at him, feeling a pang of guilt. Jake was everything I could have ever asked for. He was my rock, my partner, my best friend. Yet here I was, letting the past creep in and cloud my present. I didn't want to burden him with my old emotions, but I knew I couldn't hide it forever. "I don't know," I said, swirling the wine in my glass. It's been 10 years, why now? Why is he coming back into my life after all this time? I've moved on, Jake. I've built a life with you, but I guess a part of me wonders what he wants." Jake set his glass down and leaned forward, his gaze steady. "You don't owe him anything, Sarah. You've made your choice, and I respect that. But if he's trying to come back into your life now, it's his problem, not yours." I nodded, grateful for his unwavering support. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't being entirely honest with myself. I had moved on, yes. But had I really closed the door on Ben? Had I fully let go of what we had, or was there a part of me that was still holding on to the past, however small? A week passed, and I tried to focus on the things that mattered. My marriage, my career, and the future Jake and I were building together. But every now and then, I would find myself checking my phone, hoping for a message from Ben. But that message never came. Instead, it was the silence that gnawed at me, the uncertainty of not knowing what had driven him to reach out after so long. Had he really changed? Was he seeking closure, or was this just a case of nostalgia? Maybe he didn't even want to rekindle a relationship. Maybe he simply wanted to know if I was still the same girl he once loved, or if I was someone entirely different now. I had no answers, but I couldn't let myself get caught up in it. One day I was sitting at my desk at work, engrossed in a report, when I saw a familiar name flash across my phone. It was Ben again. Ben, I get it, Sarah. I really do. I know I've made mistakes and I don't expect things to go back to how they were, but I just want to make sure you know that I'm sorry for how things ended. I've been thinking about it a lot lately, and I don't want to leave things unsaid between us. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me. I stared at the message for a long moment, feeling an odd mix of frustration and confusion. Why couldn't he just let it go? Why couldn't he accept that I had moved on? I had a husband now, someone who loved me, respected me, and made me feel secure. Ben's apology was sweet, but it felt hollow. It felt like it was about him, not about me. It was his need for redemption, not my need for closure. My mind raced as I considered how to respond. I could easily ignore him. I had already made it clear that I was married and happy, but something inside me was telling me to handle this with a little more grace. I didn't want to be the one who left things unfinished, especially after Ben had reached out so earnestly. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't about reopening old wounds. Maybe it was about acknowledging the past in a way that allowed me to finally let go. I began typing my response. Me, I appreciate your message, Ben, but I've moved on from the past and I'm in a place where I'm happy. I'm married and I don't need to revisit old relationships. I hope you understand that. I hit send, my fingers trembling slightly as I did. I felt like I had just closed the door on something that had been lingering for far too long. It was time to move forward, for good. But Ben didn't stop there. Over the next few days, he sent more messages, each one slightly more desperate than the last. Ben, I get it, I really do, but I just want you to know I've changed. I'm not the same guy I was back then. I've grown, Sarah. I've made mistakes and I'm owning up to them. I wish we could talk more. I miss the friendship we had. There was a part of me that wanted to reach out, to tell him that I didn't need his apology, that I was content with where I was in life. But another part of me wondered if there was more he needed to say, if his repeated messages were an indication that he wasn't just seeking closure, but something deeper. Maybe he felt guilty. Maybe he felt like he had failed me, like he had let me go too easily back then. Whatever the reason, I couldn't keep allowing him to reach out, to keep dragging me back into a past that had already been left behind. I needed to shut this down, once and for all. I looked at the messages again, my mind racing. Then I took a deep breath and did something I hadn't done in years. I snapped a photo of my wedding ring, the diamond sparkling in the soft light of my office. I wanted to show him once and for all that my life had changed, that I wasn't the girl he had known in high school. I attached the picture to a message and typed, "Me, this is my reality now. Ben, I've moved on and I'm happy. You should have stayed in touch when I was single." I paused for a moment, reading over the message. I didn't want to be harsh, but I needed to be firm. I needed him to understand that there was no going back. There was no place for him in my life anymore. I pressed send, my heart pounding as the message left my phone. I had finally drawn the line. The next few days passed in a haze. I didn't hear from Ben again, and part of me felt a sense of relief. But another part of me wondered if I had been too harsh, too quick to close the door on him. It wasn't that I still had feelings for him. It was that part of me still felt like I owed him some kind of closure, some kind of finality. But as the days went by, I realized something important. I had already moved on. I didn't need closure from Ben, because the closure had already happened. It had happened the moment I met Jake, the moment I chose a future with him, and the moment I realized that my happiness didn't depend on the past. Ben had been a part of my journey, yes, but he was no longer a part of my story. It had been a few days since I sent Ben my final message, the one with the picture of my wedding ring, the one that I thought would close the door on any lingering feelings from the past. I had made it clear that I was happy, that I had moved on, and that my life was now focused on the future I was building with Jake. I thought the situation was over, and I could finally put it all behind me. But the days that followed weren't as peaceful as I had hoped. The silence from Ben stretched on for a while. I was relieved, but at the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still hanging in the air. Ben had been a significant part of my life once, and the emotions tied to him weren't so easily dismissed. Even though I had made it clear that I had no intention of rekindling any relationship with him, a small part of me couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. Would he accept it and move on, or would he try again, push harder this time? I hoped it would be the former, but there was a nagging feeling in my gut that told me it wasn't over yet. Jake noticed it too. He was perceptive, always aware of my moods, and lately he had been asking me if everything was okay. I tried to brush it off at first, insisting that I was fine, that I was just tired from work or dealing with some family stuff. But I couldn't deny it anymore. There was still something unresolved, something that kept creeping up at the back of my mind. Ben. His presence was like a shadow, always hanging around, even though he wasn't physically there. A week after sending my final message, my phone buzzed again. It was Ben. I stared at the notification for a long time before opening it. I already knew what was coming. I had expected it even. Ben wasn't someone who gave up easily, and I was sure he wasn't going to let me close the door on him that quickly. But this time, there was something different about the message. It wasn't an apology or an invitation to reconnect. No, this one was far more personal. Ben, I've been thinking about you a lot, Sarah, about us, about everything. I can't stop wondering what could have been. And honestly, I think I've realized something. I wasn't just in love with you back then, I've always been in love with you. And I don't want to go through life wondering what if. Can we meet? Just to talk. My breath caught in my throat. I felt my heart race and my mind spiral into chaos. The intensity of his words hit me like a wave, crashing over me, sweeping me back into a time I had thought I had left behind. I hadn't expected this. I hadn't expected him to confess that he still had feelings for me, to throw that bombshell after everything I had made clear. I glanced at the screen again, trying to steady myself. Ben wasn't just asking to reconnect. He was asking for something more. He was asking for the possibility of starting over, of revisiting a relationship that I had carefully and intentionally put behind me, and I wasn't sure how to respond. But I knew that this wasn't just about Ben. It was about me too. It was about how his message made me feel, how it shook the foundation of everything I had worked so hard to build with Jake. I couldn't help but think of the past, of the intensity of my relationship with Ben, and the feelings that had been so raw and so real back then. But that was then. I had moved on. I had chosen a different path. But there was something about Ben's words, something about the vulnerability he was showing that made me hesitate. I hadn't expected this. I hadn't expected him to be so open, so willing to lay his heart bare. Maybe he had always felt this way, even when we were together. Maybe I had never really known the depth of his feelings. But I also knew one thing for sure. I wasn't the same person I had been when I was with him. I had grown. I had evolved. And I wasn't willing to sacrifice what I had now for a relationship that had ended for a reason. I turned my phone over and set it down, trying to push the thought out of my mind. I couldn't keep going in circles. I couldn't keep second-guessing myself. Jake was my future, and I wasn't going to let Ben or anyone else take that from me. But as the evening wore on, I found myself picking up the phone again, staring at Ben's message. I couldn't help it. There was a part of me that wanted to respond, to acknowledge what he had said, to ask him what he meant. I hadn't heard him speak so honestly in years. And yet, the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't need to go down that path. I was married to Jake. My life was with him now, not Ben. With a sigh, I opened the message, and I began to type my response. Me, Ben, I've already told you where I stand. I'm happy in my life now, and I don't want to revisit the past. I've moved on. I think it's time for you to do the same. I pressed send, but this time, there was no finality in it. There was no sense of relief. Instead, it felt like a closing door that I wasn't quite sure I was ready to shut. The next few days felt like an eternity. Ben didn't respond right away, and for a while, I convinced myself that I had made the right decision. I focused on my work, on my marriage, on the life I had built. But then, a few days later, I received another message from him. Ben, I get it, Sarah. I really do. I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable, but I think you should know that I'm not just doing this because of the past. I'm doing this because I've realized that what we had was real. I still care about you, and I don't want to leave this chapter unfinished. I stared at the message, my heart sinking. What was I supposed to do with this? How was I supposed to respond to someone who was still clinging to something that had ended long ago? I wasn't sure anymore. A part of me wanted to tell him to stop, to leave me alone and let me move on with my life. But another part of me felt the weight of his words. He wasn't just reminiscing about the past. He was asking for something more. He was asking for a chance, even if that chance wasn't with me, but for closure, for peace. I took a deep breath and began typing again. Me, Ben, I appreciate your honesty, but I've moved on. What we had is in the past, and it's time to let it stay there. I'm married now. Please respect that. I pressed send and immediately felt a wave of guilt. Was this the right thing to do? Was I being too harsh? But deep down, I knew the answer. This wasn't about Ben anymore. It was about me. It was about my marriage to Jake and the life I had built. I had to stay true to that. No matter how much Ben's words affected me, I wasn't going to let him disrupt my present. I had made my choice, and it was Ben. It was Jake. That night, as I lay next to Jake in bed, I couldn't help but feel the weight of everything that had transpired over the past few days. My phone buzzed one last time, but I ignored it. I didn't need to read it. I didn't need to open that door again. Jake turned to me, his eyes soft with concern. "Everything okay?" he asked, his voice low. I nodded, giving him a reassuring smile. "Yeah, everything's fine," I said, though there was a part of me that still felt unsettled. I had done the right thing, hadn't I? Jake wrapped his arm around me, pulling me closer. "I'm here for you, you know that, right?" I smiled, nestling against him. "I know, I'm lucky to have you." And in that moment, I realized just how true that was. Ben's past didn't have a place in my future. I had everything I needed right here. The days following my last message to Ben were a blur. I had closed the door on the past as firmly as I could. But even though I had made my decision to focus on my marriage to Jake and move on from any lingering feelings tied to Ben, there was a nagging feeling in my gut that wouldn't go away. I knew I was doing the right thing. Ben's repeated attempts to contact me were unsettling, but in the end, I wasn't the same person I had been back then. The life I had with Jake, the life I had chosen for myself, was more fulfilling than any relationship I had experienced in my past. But there was something about the way Ben had kept pushing, his persistence, his desire to reconnect, his need to revisit something that had ended years ago. It was as though he couldn't accept that I had moved on, and in some ways, that kept pulling me back into the past, even if only mentally. I was at work when I received a text from Jake that afternoon. "Jake, hey, I've been thinking. Maybe we should plan a weekend getaway, something for just the two of us. We both deserve it. Let me know what you think." I smiled at the message, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over me. Jake was always thinking of ways to make our relationship stronger, to show me that he was present in every moment, in every way. This was exactly what I needed: time away from the stress of work, time away from everything else. Just the two of us, alone. I hadn't realized how much I needed it until I read his message. "Me, that sounds perfect. I love that. Let's make it happen." It was exactly the kind of escape I needed, to reset, to refocus, and to remind myself of the incredible life I had. I wasn't going to let the past overshadow my present. I wasn't going to let Ben or anyone else threaten the love I had with Jake. As the weekend getaway approached, I found myself feeling lighter, more at peace. Jake and I had been through so much together, and this trip was just what we needed to reconnect and deepen our bond. But as we packed for the trip, something unexpected happened that pulled me back into the chaos I had been trying to avoid. It started with a phone call. The morning of our trip, as Jake and I were loading up the car with our bags, I saw that my phone was ringing. It was an unknown number, and my first instinct was to ignore it. I didn't want to deal with anything work-related or family drama while I was supposed to be focusing on the weekend. But for some reason, I hesitated before hitting the ignore button. I picked up the phone and answered. "Hello?" "Sarah," the voice on the other end was unmistakable. It was Ben. I immediately felt a rush of tension flood my body. My heart rate picked up, and I could hear the sound of my own breath in my ears. What did he want now? "Ben, I told you already, I'm happy. I'm married. I've moved on," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but my frustration was evident. I know, Ben replied quickly, his voice soft but desperate. "I just needed to hear it from you, Sarah. I'm not trying to disrupt your life, I swear. I needed to know that you're okay, that you've really moved on, because I still can't stop thinking about you. I think I've made a huge mistake. You were the one that got away." I felt a sharp sting in my chest at his words. It was as though he was pulling at a thread I had carefully sewn up. But I knew I had to stand firm. I had to remember why I had made the decision to shut this down. "I'm fine, Ben. I'm really happy with my life. I've built something with Jake, and I'm not going to let you come between that," I said, my voice firm but tired. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment I thought he was going to hang up. But instead he spoke again, his voice quieter, almost pleading. "I get it, Sarah. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for how things ended. I didn't treat you right. You were always better than me. And I know I can't change the past, but I want you to know that I've learned a lot from it. I'm not the same person I was back then. I just needed you to know that." The sincerity in his voice hit me like a wave. For a moment I was caught off guard. Ben had never spoken to me like this. He had never been so open, so vulnerable. And for a moment I almost felt a flicker of sympathy. But then I remembered everything I had built. I remembered Jake, the man I had chosen, the person who had been there for me through thick and thin. Ben was a chapter in my life, yes, but Jake was the person I wanted to write the rest of my story with. "I appreciate your apology, Ben," I said, my voice gentle but resolute. "But I've moved on. I've built a life I love, I'm happy with Jake, and I'm not going to go back to the past. I felt the weight of the words leave my body as soon as I said them. I meant every word. This was it. This was the closure I needed, not just for Ben, but for myself. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Ben spoke again, his voice softer. I understand. I just wanted you to know I'll always care about you, Sarah. I'm sorry for everything. Goodbye, Ben, I said, my voice firm but steady. And with that, I hung up. Jake looked at me with a mixture of concern and curiosity as I turned around. What was that about? I took a deep breath, feeling the tension in my chest finally ease. It was Ben. He just wanted to apologize. He's been thinking about the past and he wanted to know if I was okay. Jake nodded, not seeming surprised. Did he get the message? I smiled at him, the weight of everything finally lifting. Yeah, I think he did. Jake took my hand and kissed the top of my head. You did the right thing, Sarah. I'm proud of you. I leaned into him, feeling the peace settle over me. I knew, now more than ever, that my life with Jake was where I was meant to be. The past was behind me, and I wasn't going to let anyone, not even Ben, drag me back into it. As we drove to our weekend getaway, the miles between us and the city felt like a symbolic separation from everything that had tried to hold me back. I looked at Jake, his hand resting on the steering wheel, the road stretching out ahead of us. For the first time in weeks, I felt truly at peace. The weekend was everything I needed, a chance to reconnect with Jake, to focus on what truly mattered, and to leave the past where it belonged. Ben was a part of my history, but he wasn't a part of my future. I had made my choice, and I was finally ready to embrace it completely.